This is an intro. Intro.
Hustle and Flowchart with your boy, my boy, Matt Wolf and Joe Fier.
Hey. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
French
Was
is
that
horrible.
a question? Bon appetit.
Isn't that hello?
Bon appetit?
No, bonjour.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Well, that's what I was saying to you because we're talking to Sue. Sue Rice. She's in France.
Oh, you mean the one who hammered in that she's a California girl?
But she lives in France.
That's true.
Oh, Matthew.
She's one of those French California girls.
One of them.
Actually, she's more of a Californian French girl because California was first.
That's true. And she's probably been in France, I don't know, equal time or so?
I have no idea.
I don't think she told us that, but today we're talking with the one and the only Sue. Wait, hold on. Sue, the female David Ogilvy Rice.
Yes.
That is true. So Sue Rice, yeah, she's awesome. And you'll get it from this conversation is that like we can go all day long if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And just talk about just any kind of tangent, but bring it back. We always relate it and connect it to what the main topic is that we're trying to get across.
And that is actually kind of the topic of this episode is talking about things that don't seem related and then bringing them back to being. So this is an episode about copywriting and storytelling and persuasion and getting people to buy more of your shit.
That's
what this episode is. And, Sue Rice, she's a longtime marketing strategist, professional copywriter, and an international communications expert. She's famous for the award-winning copy she has written for countless entrepreneurs as well as prestigious companies such as Ericsson, Lego, Nike, Solomon, and Wrangler.
Them jeans. Yeah, and her email copywriting. So in this episode, she gets into how she's getting some record-breaking open rates like consistently throughout a whole sequence, not just like the first email or two, like that's kind of normal. And then click-through rates that are crazy because, like we all know, email, just attention and the clutter there, everything's just, attention's decreasing and clutter is increasing. So she talks about how to get attention and do it in a very smart way without doing the shouting that most people do.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how to get 50% open rates on your emails, how to write
40 to 60.
40 to 60. Well, I averaged. We talk about subject lines on emails and how to write better subject lines, how to write better emails that get more clicks, how to bake in scarcity to your offers to make sure people take action now.
And what scarcity to use, what's best.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff that's going to help you write a lot better copy.
Yeah, so you're going to need those notes. They are always, if you're a new listener, or even if you're one that you've heard this a million times and you haven't checked out the notes yet, you're crazy. It's insane. So we always have free notes on every single episode that we have on this show. We're even going in the backlogs and doing this for other reasons because we have a cool little membership site that, you get access to everything. But we're talking about the notes for this show right here. We take notes every single time. We have a note taker. It's not us, but we have a whole crew
Some
of people.
Are me. I've taken a couple of them.
Oh, a couple. I've taken none. I love to read the notes though. So actually someone that, no, I'm not going to talk about it now because it's a different episode, but basically he loves to read the notes. He used to listen to the podcast, but then he's like, man, I want to save some time and get those notes instead. So he just reads the notes exclusively. We'd love if you listen to the podcast too, but just know we got the notes. So if you're a note person and you want quick takeaways, where are they going to get them?
Well, there's two ways to get them, Joe. They can go to hustleandflowchart.com/comp. That's hustleandflowchart.com/comp.
Was that hustle and flowchart?
Yeah, I hiccuped a little.
Okay.
Hustleandflowchart.com/comp. Or second way to get. Did I say shart again?
No, it's just like hiccup.
Good. I'm glad I didn't shart on that one. All right. So the other way to get them is you can text the word comp, C-O-M-P, to 38470. And a lot of people are doing this. I'm actually very surprised how many people are actually pulling out their phone and texting comp to 38470.
Good segue. No, it actually, in all actuality, if you have a podcast or if you're just trying to do something online, ask them to do a little opt-in to SMS. Yeah. I mean, who do we use?
Call Loop.
Call Loop. So we just use Call Loop, except you opt in that way and it's freaking work. It's awesome. Yeah. So it must be convenient and helping you out. So what's the number again? I still haven't memorized it.
I know, I haven't either. I'm actually looking at my notes. It's text the word comp, C-O-M-P, to 38470, or you can go to the old-fashioned website and opt in the old-fashioned way at hustleandflowchart.com/comp.
Cool. All right. Well, let's go
get a copy on.
Get your copy on. Sue, welcome to the show, finally.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Heck yeah. No, I appreciate it. And we're on opposite sides of the globe, or maybe not totally opposite. You're in France. And,
I'm in France. Yeah.
Sitting by a nice big old fire. We kind of jealous. Yeah, big old glass of wine. No, you don't have wine over there. I was hoping you did. We're sipping on coffee.
But yeah, this is
sorry about that. Caffeine is my drug of choice. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Mine too.
I think this is our third try making this call happen. So we're excited to finally make this thing happen. We've been looking forward to it forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And big shout out to Shramko, James Shramko, our mutual buddy, for making this happen too.
Thank you, James.
I'm sure he's listening. He claims he does, at least. But yeah, let's Sue. Yeah, you and I actually. It was like right when he connected us. I think you and I had like a hour-long chat or something. It felt like we were sitting at a cafe or something. I think we were both drinking some kind of drink, and it was just a video looking at your. I don't know. It just felt like we were just hanging out, and it was a good time to connect with you. And you kind of told us a crazy. I mean, you've done everything. It seems like from California. Over there in France, we've done a ton of stuff in between too. So I want to hear it from you. Like, where did this all start?
Yeah, so I guess it all started in California. I'm a California girl, third generation. I don't even think you can find one of those anymore.
That's true.
And
my kids are third generation.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like California is a country, but yeah. So I grew up in what is now Silicon Valley. It was a little bit less developed back then, and I went to Stanford, but always sort of had I always had this sort of wanderlust, I guess is the best way to describe it. And so I ended up doing my graduate work mostly in Bologna, Italy, through an international economics program with Johns Hopkins, which of course is nothing related to being an entrepreneur and being a copywriter. But after I came back from Italy, I landed in New York and started this whole thing off classic on Madison Avenue, working for Ogilvy and Mather.
How cool is that?
Yeah, it is pretty cool, right? Wow. And like Todd says to me, gosh, no one has that experience working for Ogilvy.
Yeah.
It's like, and it was really kind of the heady days of advertising, and it's sort of maybe not Mad Men. It was not that far back, but it was sort of that same kind of the end of that world, because that really doesn't exist anymore. And then I ended up going to BBDO, and I was in their international department. And very shortly after joining BBDO, I was, much to my surprise, I and 3 other men went over to Paris to start their BBDO European headquarters. And it was a huge opportunity. To be honest with you, I mean, I hope none of them are listening, but I think they thought I would just be like the pretty little secretary kind of, but I ended up sort of grabbing the opportunity, because a lot of times in these fledgling, I think that's sort of the glamour of being in a startup or being an entrepreneur. Sometimes in these startups there's huge opportunities,
right?
And it was huge. It was like I literally went from being a lowly assistant to I was the communications director of BBDO Europe, and it was just an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And loved it. I don't really want to go into, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but what I did was basically our remit was that BBDO, unlike a lot of ad agencies, had not grown organically. They had bought all these creative agencies and all these little creative agencies around BBDO, and our remit around Europe. And our remit was to kind of get them to work, all these creative egos to work together. So I came up, so what I came up with this idea was we started doing these sort of studies called future studies, future man, future woman. And they were and basically what I did, it was like really simple. I asked them to go out and it was sort of like social media before social media, ask people, what was going on in their lives. And we packaged in all these offices, got all these offices involved. And then we packaged it up into this really sexy presentation. It was like, lots of film clips and music and we just, on the basis of those studies, we made millions and millions of dollars off of them because no one else was doing that. It was sort of like, trying to talk about what the emotions were, like what women were feeling, what youth were feeling, what men were feeling. And it was, the original one was done for Gillette because BBDO worked with Gillette. Mm-hmm. So it was like the whole, I don't know if you remember the Best a Man Can Get campaign. I don't even know if it's still running, but it was on, that study was what that idea came from.
Really?
Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And so they were really, really powerful. And it just, oddly enough, I still think that kind of thing is powerful. It's still about connecting with where people are emotionally, right? Now, we didn't have the social media. We didn't have, it was the 90s. So there wasn't anything that we have now, all the tools we have now, but the sentiment is still the same, right? That when you write, when you create ads, is that you need to connect up with where people are and maybe a little bit ahead, right?
It's kind of future pace, like where they're going to go.
Right. Like the future woman, the whole theory behind it, which was really simplistic, to be honest with you. I basically wrote it on the back of an envelope, but was the idea that women were more confident. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, that's like, well, yeah.
Duh.
But back then, it wasn't that obvious.
Yeah, I'm sure you were ruffling feathers in the process, too, It
was just when the Spice Girls, there weren't all these girls bands. There weren't all these things that started to happen in the 90s. It was before all of that. And, definitely ruffled some feathers, for sure.
Yeah.
But, so like kind of looking a little bit, and if you watch things carefully, it's easy to see there are things happening even now, like on the internet, that if you watch, that in 2 years' time, you'll say, "Oh, well, that's obvious, right?" Mm-hmm. But if you listen and you watch, you can see trends coming forward, right? So that's basically what I did. And then, to be honest with you, we were giving away that for free. We were getting we got literally probably about somewhere between $20 and $50 million of business on the back of those things. But I realized it was a business, right? Mm-hmm. So I left and I started my own company, and my first client was Nike.
Wow.
And I did a study for them, actually. But it was interesting. I did a study for them about European women and their kind of approach to exercise, which is totally different than American women. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To be honest with you, they weren't crazy about the message.
Well, yeah. So give us a little. So you're in Europe at this time still.
Yeah, still in Europe. Yeah, I left the agency, but I never left France.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So I started working with Nike and a bunch of really big companies. Because in the process of doing all those presentations, I was on TV. People got to know who I was. So getting business was like super, super easy. But don't forget, I was an entrepreneur when that room was pretty empty.
Oh, yeah.
This is the mid 90s. There was no one. I remember going to a women's conference in Brussels in the late 90s and talking about how great it was being an entrepreneur, and people were literally looking at me with a blank face. It's like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Who are you?
And I always thought it was so great because you could actually have this really great career and also, have the flexibility to be looking after your kids when you needed to and at their school events and all that. I always thought it was kind of but I talk about being a little bit before the trend. I was at least 10 years before.
Well, did you obviously you're in the middle of this company, you saw the connections. I feel like you're good at future pacing, or at least spotting what's coming. Is that kind of what was a big catalyst? And obviously the lifestyle, it sounds like you've always been very mobile too. So you kind of wanted that flexibility, it sounds like, to become an entrepreneur and create something from everything you've, kind of honed your skills with over the years.
Yeah, I think what drove me, yes, the flexibility I'm pretty much I always wanted that. I'm not really a great person with authority, basically.
Yeah.
I think that might be something that links up a lot of entrepreneurs. So that would just, I'm fine with working with clients. I'm fine with, but I'm not really good in bureaucracies.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my thing. That's not the pool I want to swim in. And, but I think what I was trying to do in those early days with people like Solomon and Lego and all these people that I worked with, and I worked at pretty high levels. I was working with like the CEO of these companies. What I was trying to do was show them, because it wasn't a little bit, now it's like, duh. But back then it was like, I was trying to show them that the people they were advertising to, the people they were marketing to were real human beings with real emotions and real struggles and real triumphs. And so, for example, once, I don't know, you guys are probably too young to know this, but once upon a time, the way people would do research is they would bring people in, and I don't know if they still do this, but they would have like a glass wall, and people would be behind, all the like advertising agency and the client would be behind eating M&Ms, listening to like these questions, like they were like sort of like laboratory rats. That's how there was this huge sort of physical divide between you and your client. And so what I was saying to people is like, let's not do that. Let's really get to know what the real emotions. And I remember I got Nike, I got their whole, I brought them to Italy and we were like playing football with a bunch of people. And, I said, no, we're going to sit around in a living room, or we're going to go play sports, but we're not going to, because these are real people. You need to like interact with them as real people. And I did many, many strategic projects like that for the many, many companies. Solomon was another one. I don't know if you know, it's a ski company in France.
Actually, definitely. Well, I want to actually, before you go a little further, could you walk us through, like, say with Nike, for instance, and getting that true connection and researching? Maybe expand on that a bit, because it sounds like that's something anyone can still do, or at least put themselves in the shoes of their customers a bit.
I mean, one of the tricks that I use now as a copywriter, which is sort of fast forwarding to today. I mean, to be honest with you, all of this was I was always a strategic copywriter. So I would take the strategies and then I would write up their brand communications internally and externally. But the point of departure was always their consumer, right? So nowadays you can we have so many tools that can shortcut that. We don't have to like bring people to Italy and play tug of war with them. But what we can do is it's a trick that a lot of copywriters use, but it's super good, is you go on and you read reviews, right? You do review mining, and not 5-star review mining, because they're all pretty much the same, right? But you go into like 2 or 3 stars and you start hearing people's pain points. You start hearing what's really going on and what they're struggling with, and how that particular, we're not critiquing the book, but we're trying to understand what people are grappling with, right? Versus old-fashioned research where you talk to them on the phone. I mean, you can do that, but there's a lot of sources now. You can look in communities and forums and Facebook groups, and start getting a handle on, and also just experience, right?
Well, it sounds
I remember reading a sales letter from I've always thought was one of the greatest, is from, I can't remember the name of the guy who wrote it, but it was for the woman who lives in San Diego with you guys. I can't remember her name right off the bat, but she was talking. What he was talking about was it's for Amy, right? And she sells an email list building product. And the pain point, and he's so right. The pain point that he talked about was that people are embarrassed to say what size their list is.
Yep.
It's like the walk of shame. Like, how big is, it's like the question no one wants anyone to ask them. Like, how big is your list?
You don't have over 10,000 people. What's wrong with you?
But you know what I'm saying? It's like just experiencing, you don't have to be a huge researcher, or you just listen to where the real pain points are. Because a lot of times the real pain point isn't that you're 20 pounds overweight. It's that you have to wear that dress to that event, and it's embarrassing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's those moments that, like the reunions where you're like, oh my gosh.
I don't want to look like her.
I know, exactly. So, I feel like we're so lucky now because there's so many places that we can source that, but it's just really a matter of being listening.
Yeah, and I don't want to stop the flow of the progression of what makes you, of course, your story. But it sounds like you're always identifying the struggles first, and then from there, because you said, and even back in what you said, real humans, real struggles. You kind of always try to identify those struggles, and then from there, what do you do? Is it kind of like you just basically dive in deeper on the most common struggles, or do you build stories from them?
Well, I feel like when I've thought about this a lot and we'll get to why I've thought about it a lot, but I have this huge story library that I use to illustrate what people are dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've had to sort of categorize what those stories are about. And when I think about it, they're kind of two categories, right? So they're the struggles people have, the pain points, but a lot of times the pain points are driving us towards something. So if I have a pain point that I'm overweight, I want to get rid of that, right? I want to go to that place where that doesn't exist anymore. But they're not just pain points, they're also obstacles. There's things that physically we don't have. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough information, whatever those are. And then there's, of course, the famous obstacles that we have in our head, which are probably the most universal. You're probably safest when you go to those because almost everyone has that little bird on their shoulder saying, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not absolutely positive I'm going to be able to do this. So, there's the things that prevent us from doing things. And then there's the pain points that are kind of propelling us forward to getting, because it's pain. It's a pain point. It's like, if your hand is being burnt on the oven, you want to move away from the oven. That's what the pain point is. So the pain point propels us forward, and the obstacles prevent us from that momentum.
From that,
so
that makes sense.
So there's two kind of different categories, I think.
Yeah, no, I like that. And that helps a lot. And thanks for doing that, because it's almost like the pain points connect to desires a little bit. And then you have the obstacles, or like you said, limiting beliefs. It's all the stuff that we're all walking around with. We all have something. So your job is to identify this.
There's also another thing. I mean, and I'm sure you guys have all experienced this. We've read copy or seen a video or whatever where someone talks about our pain points that we can relate to. They talk about the obstacles that we can relate to. But you know what? We just don't really like the person who's talking about it. That's the thing a lot of people just forget. Sometimes I just don't buy something because I'm not really sure about the messenger. Right? Yeah. So it's also about, and there's nothing wrong with that because, fortunately everyone doesn't love everyone. So right. So I think it's also part of being marketing and being an entrepreneur is understanding who will be more likely to gravitate towards you.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking earlier about introverts and extroverts, and I think sometimes that's why partnerships work, right? I remember when I used to work with my husband, it was, there were people that would gravitate. He was more sort of the boys' boy, he played the political games, and I'm like hopeless and all that. And then there were, I was sort of the more sort of creative people so we kind of balance the room off.
Yeah, makes sense.
Some people would gravitate towards me, and some, so that's why partnerships can be so strong, right? So that there might be one in the partners that some people will be gravitating towards one member and the others to the other, and that's good though.
Yeah, I feel like that makes a good any relationship in general too, even with
exactly.
spouses. Yep.
Yeah, I think in marriages that it works that way often too.
Yeah, I agree. So that is interesting, like the messenger just matters so much, and then connecting with that other person, in maybe the language or the tone. Like there's a lot of stuff happening other than just words or there's a lot of relatability that has to happen that's unseen, it seems like.
I think so. I think so. I'm never really sure if everyone feels that way. You got to remember, my entire adult life, I've been living in a country where I speak French, obviously, but it's not my maternal language. So it's almost like you become, when they say, like if you're blind, you end up having another sense that's stronger. So I feel like my intuitive sense is super strong simply because I've become an adult person in a country where I'm not speaking there. I don't speak that. That's not my maternal language, right? If that makes sense. So I rely on my intuition much more. And also I work virtually, so I also have to rely on it there. But I think that there's always that sort of that feeling that someone just doesn't connect. Mm-hmm. And I feel like as marketers, we need to be aware of that. And it's okay, right? It's okay. I'm sure there are people listening just like, Sue sounds stupid. So, right? It's fine. That's
this
okay.
Is real talk. Sue's got
real
talk.
Yeah, that's, you know what I'm saying? There's some people that will connect, and then some people, and that's what, and in understanding who is connecting, of course, is super important.
Yeah. Well, I feel like just trying to be the person that connects with everybody, just by doing that, there's going to be people you don't connect with that they see the fact that you're trying to be everything to everybody, and that single thing is going to be what repels them from you. It's like, I think it's a detriment when somebody is trying to be everything to everybody and try to appeal to everybody. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of marketers make, is they try to say, how do I make this product? How do I make this offering? How do I make my messaging appeal to every single person that sees it? Which tends to... It's
like, I think a lot of... I'm a woman, so I will say, I find that in my humble observation, a lot of women do that in life too. It's like this people-pleasing thing. And the reality is, you undercut your power when you need to be liked by everyone. And it's a marketing lesson. It's a relationship lesson. And unfortunately, one of the things I learned really early on is, if I care what everyone thinks and want to please what everyone thinks, I'm making myself smaller. Right?
You're giving your power away, essentially.
You're giving your power away, and to what? It's like sort of the ether, right? It's like whatever. And so I feel like, obviously, it's important to be as kind as you can be and all of that. But I feel like at some point you have to say, this is me. And if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, I totally respect that. But this is where I stand. And you can see it in marketing. People who do that,
oh my God,
are much more successful.
Yeah, it's almost like they disqualify folks a lot more than they try to qualify them.
Yeah, I don't do this I normally, if I feel like that there's not a connect, I'll just, I try to do things to sort of dissuade people so that they,
right,
rather than just say, but every once in a while I say, you know what, I just don't think this is a fit.
Well, especially working with a client one-to-one, it's like, why would you want to work with someone that you don't connect with? And but even with an info product, if you have a great offer that's very clear, and the ads, for instance, you're paying for traffic, and you don't want everyone under the freaking sun clicking that ad and not buying, but like, let's get really targeted. It's really coming down to the targeted avatar, it sounds like, in the online space.
Yeah, but I think people also need to be gentle with themselves, because I know everyone talks about this, and and the reality is it's an evolution. We learn as we move forward, as we put campaigns together, as we talk to people, who is really our avatar and who isn't. I think people are always saying you got to do that up front. Well, sometimes it's like you're guessing at the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, we struggle with that for so many years.
I think everyone struggles with that. Right?
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with that. I do feel like you put an offer out there, you make your best effort based on sort of what you know already about who you think the ideal avatar is for this. And then as you collect data, you find out, well, I was close here, but really far off here. And this is who my real avatar is. And then you adjust and optimize, and it works better. And then you start to collect new data because you get more volume, and it's just an iterative process that always evolves.
Yeah. And I mean, I know for me as a copywriter, particularly when I do one-on-one work, it's like super important that I get the right fit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because when I don't, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I mean, it's very difficult.
oh yeah. Yeah. Especially with client work. I mean, it's literally someone you're agreeing to hang out with a lot, and spend a lot of your mental and emotional energy into it. It's like, you better pick them right.
Oh yeah. We ditch clients very, very quickly these days. If we tell it's not going to be a good fit after like the first call, we're like, yeah, we don't want your money.
Don't need that.
Yeah. I mean, because it's just at the end, every time I haven't listened to that, I've regretted it.
Yep.
Like big time regretted it.
And I know, speaking personally here, is I've had that's been my biggest lesson, my evolution through business, is saying no and picking the right folks, because naturally I am more of a people pleaser. And I'll definitely I don't mind working the crowd, making but there's certain folks that really I've learned to connect with and repel the others nicely, kind of quietly in their mind, be like, yeah, I'll just refer you over here to someone else. But
it's I mean, all that's so great though. I mean, because I know that's been a huge, I mean, I started this at the end of the 90s. So we're talking 20 years now, right? But that I'm still learning that. And I think that a whole idea that saying no is actually is a really important thing to be able to do in life in general, not just in our work, but and being able to say, you know what, that isn't okay. I can't do that. And that's why, I mean, I think being an entrepreneur accelerates that understanding. I think, I'm a big believer that being an entrepreneur is probably the best self-development journey that people can go on. Right.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And it's not for everyone.
No.
It's like, you really have to be, tough. There have been a few times, mainly for personal reasons, not my business, that my back has really been against the wall. But you know what? Sometimes every once in a while I'll say to my daughter, God, it was really nice back then when that was it. She goes, yeah, but you're so much more interesting now. Right?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, you like, someone was talking about Demi Moore, she just came out with that book, and they were saying, her daughter was saying she was forged, not, that's what happens when you're an entrepreneur, whether you're, you forge yourself, right?
I love that analogy.
And, it's some funny. People just can't do it, right? Yeah. They'd rather be caught standing beside an entrepreneur, but doing the actual entrepreneur gig, no, I don't think so.
Right.
No, it's funny. It was making me think of like a song that's on the radio all the time here, that it goes like 100 good stories or 100 bad days means 100 good stories. 100 good stories makes me interesting at parties.
There it is. It's so true though. Yeah. And
but I also think I personally think it gives unflappable confidence.
Oh my
Because when you go through the fire and you walk out the other side, it's like seriously, nothing can happen that I don't think I could handle, right?
And what's the worst thing? Like if you fail as a business owner or whatever, there's a little thing called bankruptcy. If anyone ever wanted a little fallback option, it doesn't. You're fine. You'll live. If you need to get, that's whatever. Yeah, there's these like you said, you can walk out the other side of the most horrific scenario or shittiest client out there and you're fine. You'll live.
But I grew up, I don't know if you know, I grew up in a town called Atherton, which is near Palo Alto. And it was, the only way I could describe it, it was a perfectionist culture.
Was that
you had to be perfect?
Was it anything about like it was
about money. It was about, it was everything. You had to be beautiful. You had to be thin. You had to be smart. You had to go to Stanford. It was just like perfection. But you know what? Cause I was actually writing some notes about, some of the mistakes I've made in my life. But one of the biggest mistakes was that, right? That compulsion to be perfect, because if you're trying to be perfect, you can't evolve. And that's what's so great about being an entrepreneur, because it's impossible to be perfect as an entrepreneur. It's not just not possible. You can kind of fake perfection in the corporate world, I think, but you can't. That's hard to do when you're an entrepreneur.
Well, it's hard to mask that, especially if your personality is so ingrained as an entrepreneur or as your business. But even if it's not in the brand itself, it's with your company, it's with your team, the culture and everything you bring. So it's everything. But you can't
if you want to be if you want to be perfect, you won't move forward because you'll be too afraid. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the story of Sarah Blakely's father. Who's like they would come to the dinner table, and he would say every day, "What was how did you fail today?
How did you fail today?" That. Yeah. It's awesome. I love that. And I love this exercise. I just wrote it down because I want to do it. Is literally go through and just write down every single mistake I can think of that I've made. And, it's almost like just an ever-growing list, but it'd be cool to always, occasionally, obviously look back at the list and you do some meditate, you could journal on all that stuff. But, like you said, it's going to be an evolution.
Yeah. And on the other side of every mistake is you learn about yourself, you evolve, you get ideas from that. If your back isn't against the wall, why would what's the motivation?
You get comfy. You get too comfortable and you're like, I don't need to fix that bad habit of mine.
I worked with a guy it was actually at BBDO, and I can remember him. I remember being so shocked by this. He said, I'm being as quiet as I can in my office until retirement because I don't want anyone to notice me. I was thinking, that's so horrible.
What kind of existence is that? Like,
that's exactly what he did.
It's too bad. Yeah. But like you said, as an entrepreneur, if you do that, it's like, well, you're obviously not, throwing offers out there to people. You're not telling people what you do, showing your value to the world. So, but it's not cut out for everyone. And that's okay. But we all should. I love the whole mistakes, and we totally took a detour from your story and where you were going. I think we went down this rabbit hole of pain points, obstacles, but then I think you were going to hit on experiences. Yeah,
we've kind of left it off at to me, a lot of what I do, I think a lot of what a lot of people do is just like a Mexican meal, right? So you have the same ingredients. So what I was doing for Lego and Nike and even BBDO really isn't actually that different than what I'm doing today. It's a burrito, not a taco, right?
So true. Growing up in San Diego, we know.
Yeah.
It's about being strategic. It's about listening and being intuitive about where people are, because that's really what it's all about. And it's about expressing that. See, and of course, I'm totally biased on this particular topic, but I think, to me, it's what matters are not your little boxes and your little funnels and the lines that connect the boxes up, but it's what the words that are inside them. It's all about the words. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people get frustrated, right? Because they line up their boxes and they do their fancy funnels, and then it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, we've been there many times.
We're there constantly. We're still there constantly when we're putting out new offers.
So, Sue, how should we approach this instead of funnels first?
It's really about it's so much about the message, and it's about having those sort of fresh insights about where people are, right? And one sort of fast forwarding to what I do now is, and again, this has all been an evolution, but I've been doing strategic copywriting essentially from the beginning. That's what I've been doing in different guises and in different forms.
Right.
But now because I prefer to work with, one of the things that started to frustrate me I remember I did this huge thing about, with Solomon. We traveled around the world. We talk to people because, they're all about the experience of the mountain, right? But they're just sitting there talking about fiberglass and the fact that it's, 2 centimeters of this and made up of that. And it's just like all about no emotion to it, right?
Yeah.
So we went around and we talked to skiers. And anyway, I did this whole presentation, which the board gave me a standing ovation. It was epic. And I came back 3 months later and they hadn't done anything with it.
Yeah, of course.
And so I thought, I can't do this anymore. I need to be working directly. I need to be working in smaller companies with people that can really implement what I'm doing. So that's when, and also it sort of coincided with the fact that the internet was becoming more and more sort of that wasn't a side anymore. It was the main meal. And so it kind of all so I started working with much smaller companies, and that's what I'm doing now because I prefer it. I work with, a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. Yeah, well,
it seems like, you have traction, or you can see the traction fairly quickly when you're working with a smaller, maybe not a smaller, well, it is a smaller company, but you can actually hey, do this, move adjust these words this specifically, and then you'll get that impact that you desire as a copywriter as well.
Yeah, I'm one of the battles that I had given my advertising background, which I don't actually confess very often. So you guys, I'll be confessing it here tonight, yes. Or morning your time, is that I always had a battle about direct response. So direct response copywriting really works, right? It really does work. But I always, having come from the advertising side, once upon a time, there was this huge, the direct response agencies were sort of, you kind of felt sorry for them, right? They were we were the big advertising agencies doing the big Super Bowl ads, and they were just doing these stupid direct mail pieces, right? And but then of course the internet turned that one upside down,
right?
So it's obvious you can see the power of direct response, but I always had a battle with the tone and manner. It was too in your face. For me, it just felt too, and I actually still believe that. So that's when I started experimenting with wrapping up, using direct response conversion methods, but wrapping it up. I guess Brown would call it his big ideas, but wrapping it up in stories and metaphoric storytelling so that the product or the pain point that we were talking about could be seen in a different light, if that makes sense. That is, and it to me, it wasn't that it softened the direct response. It actually does the opposite. It makes it even stronger, but it feels it just feels much more friendly, if that makes sense. And in stories, it's proven by studies, stories engage people much more completely than sort of just rational arguments do.
Yeah.
So you need both, of course, by the way. So that's sort of that. So, there is a line that took me from those advertising days on Madison Avenue all the way to where I am now. And I do direct response copywriting, but by the way, I think words are super important, but I will also say that words are not all equal, and how, pieces, people, it's not, I think that there are certain key writing assets that people have that drive the most sales. And at the top of that list, whilst it's often forgotten, are emails, in my opinion. It's where the action happens. You talk to any successful marketer and they will all tell you the same thing, from Perry Belcher to Justin Brooke to James Schramko to just, that the bulk of at least half of their revenues coming from email. So if theoretically, at least 30% of your revenue should be coming from email. But people it's like they're leaving money on the table because they don't really know how to do it. And you can see, just open up your inbox and you can see how badly it's bad.
Yeah, it's getting bad.
It's really bad. Yeah. It's really. Am I allowed to swear on this?
You can say whatever you want to.
They're kind of crap, right?
Yeah. That's swearing? Come on.
Come on, Sue. You can do better than that.
I was expecting more out of you.
People pleaser.
Right.
No, But but what is sort of ironic is it's so crowded and everyone's yelling and everyone's shouting, and it's so easy to stand out.
Mm-hmm.
It's the biggest paradox of what's happening right now, because everyone's using the same templates and the same funnels and the same boxes and the same, and all you have to do is step slightly to the left or to the right and do something slightly different. And I mean, I just did a product launch for someone who, we sent out 30 emails, and all the way through, we were getting 40 to 50% open rates.
That's awesome.
He made, all the way through, that's okay. The first couple ones, but it's because they were dressed up. They were framed in these beautiful metaphoric stories that were pertinent to the people I was talking to, right? So not just any story, but they were actually something that they could relate to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that we watch every day. We listen in the news that you can grab stories about the California fires or about, and you can any story out there can be made to have a lesson for your business and the pain points that you address and the products that you and services that you offer. It's just with a little extra thinking. You can't find it in a template, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you actually just reminded me, because I believe, unless I'm just making this up, when you and I talked, a couple months ago, you said you save a ton of stories that just connect, and then you kind of store them away and you use them in the exact same way that you're talking about right now for client work.
I have a story library.
Talk about that a little bit.
I collect these. I've been collecting them for years, and I use. I mean, I want to give credit where credit's due, because I learned how to do this. He didn't talk about it exactly the same way, but I learned how to do this years ago. I went to I don't know if it was a workshop or I guess sort of a mini conference or workshop that was given by Matt Fier. Do you know him?
Yeah.
He's a genius. He's a really interesting guy. And he basically, he had this formula where you would, you'd start off an email, you'd tell a story, you'd have a lesson of the story, and then you'd connect it up with your product and service. So that's when all this began. I started doing, and now I've kind of developed it into my own system, but that is where it's, it took me a while also to figure, because it sounds so simple. It took me a while to figure out how genius it really was.
Right.
Because, but if you look at your inbox, no one, there are a few people doing that, but people talk about storytelling. They're always talking about their brand. It's like, no, that's one story maybe, but it's boring.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what people really care about. Let's talk about, stuff that's happening and, so happening in the news, what's happening right now. And let's lean into our prospects world, because what we're all doing is trying to get them to lean into our world. And this is where the dots connect backwards to what I was trying to do with the Legos and Nikes of the world. Let's lean into their world. Let's listen to let's talk, people talk about the conversation in their mind, but they're talking about the conversation in their mind about their products. No, I'm talking about their conversation in general.
Right. Well,
right, what they're talking about at their dinner table tonight, right?
This is just like it's you're leaning into their world, because it's like a conversation. I mean, a conversation doesn't go one way, but I could see a lot of folks, in email specifically, like you said, they're shouting. They're not having a conversation. They're not listening. They're not giving a little showing a little relatability to that reader's world. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're doing with your stories.
But the stories, I just want to underline this. A lot of times the stories that I write about have nothing to do with the product category or the market that my client is operating in. Right? It's about, let's just take the California fires.
Sure.
So you could talk about the California fire, everyone talks about how horrible it is and everyone's losing all their homes. But the reality is, it's actually, there's a reason those fires are happening. There's a natural reason those fires are happening, because the brush is supposed to burn out it's a natural thing that happens where the fires. I mean, I think it gets a little bit because California, there's so many people and all the houses.
It's like a combo here, but yeah, it's a natural occurrence.
But there
it's
is
good.
but fundamental, there is a natural occurrence happening,
and it's good.
And
for
it's
the
just
earth.
like, and it's a little bit, you could draw parallels to, there's a natural rebirth, and sometimes we have to get rid of things in our lives that aren't good, things in our business that aren't working for us, things in our relationships that aren't working. You could easily draw that parallel to an array of products and markets. You with me?
Yeah.
But bringing in a story that everyone's watching. Everyone's watching there aren't any fires right now, I don't think.
No, I think we're good.
There certainly are in Sydney, right?
Yeah,
but that's not just an example of, or you could, if you dare. I'm not a big person on bringing politics into things because I just know it's very it can be a bit tricky to deal with that. But if you're brave enough, you could talk about the impeachment process and what all that means.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so, there's a lot happening, but there's also universal stories, stories about insecurities, stories about people redeeming themselves, redemption stories. So there's a lot of also, what I would call more timeless stories that aren't in the news today. So there's just so much, children's stories.
Yeah.
Right.
So with the emails, so telling a good story obviously has an emotional response, gets people to take actions. But before they get to the story, they've got to open the email, right? They've got to be compelled to click on it and actually read this story. What sort of advice do you have for because you said that you just worked on a launch and got 50% open rates across the board. What kind of things were you doing to make sure people were actually paying attention to the emails you were putting out there?
Yeah, the subject lines. I mean, some people say subject lines aren't important, and that has always sort of slightly bewildered me. I don't understand, because if people aren't opening the door, they're not going to walk into your living room, right?
Right.
You need them to open the door, and that's what the subject line does, right? So I think a lot, you just look at your own behavior and why I open up. It's almost always because there's a curiosity factor. I mean, there's many different ways that you can do it, but question marks, what about you? Or, things that are sort of incomplete that you're like, okay, what about me? Why are they saying that? But it just there needs to be, the thing about it can't be tricky.
Yeah. So it's got to kind of create an open loop where they're like, I need to know what the rest of this email's about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of incomplete. The one thing I will say, though, I think it's important that, like anything, it has to be a balance. So email is all about the yin and the yang, right? So you have to have, a lot of people think emails are about just setting up autoresponder sequences, which is sort of like saying, okay, I go to this party, I say, welcome, really good to see you. And then I don't talk to someone for 8 months. And then I expect them to know who I am. It's like, no, that doesn't work like that. Right. So there's a yin and a yang between autoresponder sequences and more dynamic sequences that you're creating ongoing. There's a yin and a yang between, you can't have every single email either be story-based, right? So you have, sort of transactional emails that I think people sometimes that are actually they've got really high open rates. So, but there might be a way of squeezing out the mileage of a transaction email that people don't do. You have, you know what I'm saying? So I think that, there's a crafting of sequences and of an entire strategy so that it doesn't always feel like, if you, every single time I get an email from Sue, there's a story. It's like, oh, I know that, there needs to be some unexpected. That goes for the subject lines, because you can't use the same tactic every single time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, you know what? The interesting thing is, surprisingly for us, I think the emails that get the best open rates are the ones, this is in our scenario, are the ones where we're flat out saying, hey, this offer is 50% off today only, grab it, right? Where it's just straight up, hey, we're doing a sale, here's what we're doing, click the email. And those emails get the best open rates. I don't like sending those all the time because I think they will become less and less effective. But for whatever reason, those are typically,
they do work. But that's also, that's a good example of balance. So I don't think I don't think there should be gratuitous emails. I don't think there should be gratuitous content. I think every single thing that you write should have a purpose and should be creating a desire for what it is that you are ultimately selling. It can be done in an elegant way, but I don't believe in just sharing, just sort of to create goodwill. You want to be planting seeds elegantly in people's heads. And, there is no doubt about it, because I've written thousands and thousands of emails. And every time you do, the 50% off flash sale ends tonight at midnight. Those are the ones that get opened the most, and those are the ones that react. But, you need to remember that you can't only have those either.
Right.
Right? Because there needs to, it's just like, if you had a friend and every time you talk to him, it's like, hey, I've got this really great idea. I have this fantastic thing I want you to buy. But after a while, you're like, can we just talk about something else? Right.
Yeah.
So there needs to be, that's what I talk about, the yin and the yang. That's why, but even the story-based emails are not just sort of gratuitous stories.
Right.
There's a reason behind them. They're illustrating in a new way how your product can help them. They're illustrating their pain points so they can relate to it better, right?
Yeah, the story kind of creates an analogy that makes the offer make more sense.
It's metaphoric. It's and using analogies. It's like, I always, and some of the best marketers in the world, like someone like Steve Jobs, right? I mean, you guys all know about the 1984 ad, right? That was a metaphor. Right. It was a metaphor for IBM versus Apple. IBM being the conformist, no one has any opportunity to express, whereas and Apple was the woman who ran into that room and was the only one in color and who basically threw a hammer to the screen and destroyed it, basically saying, and it was all that was a very clever metaphor. He was really good at those metaphors and those analogies.
Wow.
That's, but he even went one step farther, which was, we talked about leaning in. He was also leaning in to the sense of self-empowerment that the baby boomers were all about, right? So he was leaning in, he was he was making Apple part of that lexicon, part of that dialogue. It was super clever.
The crazy ones, and then just kind of expanded on that. He just expanded that whole vision. Yeah,
and that's what baby boomers were proud of. They were proud of the fact that they were thinking different. They were independent. They were saying no to the conformism of the 1950s, and he knew, being a baby boomer himself, he knew that, and that was, so he took metaphors not just to the product level, but he basically made Apple part of the social cultural dialogue. And so he really, really did lean in.
Yeah.
And that's why Apple, if you look at the stats, they were had 8% of the market. They had no percentage of the market, but the reason they survived and why everyone wished they bought a lot of Apple stocks in the 1980s and 90s is because of that.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it was.
He just wrapped that message, those beliefs. He knew the pains that people were dealing with, and it was timely. Like you said, they had similar obstacles, and he's like, here's a new mechanism, here's a new thing you can do, and wrapped it in every piece of that business.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. So, and you see the power of that, the power of whatever you want to call it, word wrapping or metaphoric storytelling, because as everyone talks about storytelling. You probably had a lot of people on your podcast talking about storytelling, but everyone talks about it in terms of storytelling your brand. But that's like a tiny sliver of what you can do. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's like the that's like the kindergarten version of storytelling.
It's true. Yeah, there's so many dynamics to it. There's modalities, and with us, a lot of our stories come out on the podcast right here. So we talked about attention and connection. Well, we've seen no better, at least in the way of creating content like this, than having a podcast. That's why we love it. But then emails help, but then it's great because I hop on calls with a lot of folks that we have as potential clients and just whoever our subscribers, and they talk like us. They relate to us. It's like we're buddies by the time we get to that point on the phone. And there's so much to be learned through that, but it's interesting the way that you can buy for attention, but really it comes from the relationship that's built through time. It's not an immediate thing, and that's where I think the blend, if it's like you were saying, just straight up direct mail all the time, or these shouting all the time, doesn't have a lot of longevity to that.
Yeah, and you feel like you're being sold to, and that's sort of the antithesis of what social media was supposed to be like. I feel like we've kind of reverted. I don't know. I just feel like social media sort of is in a crisis right now.
I agree.
Like, and it's a pity because there's something very. I mean, I always joked that I was doing social media before social media because I was trying to make that connection. And then there was like this sort of honeymoon period where we were making those, but now it's just disintegrated, and we have influencers that it's like faux influencers and faux entrepreneurs and and people that are so successful, and then you open up the curtain, it's like the Wizard of Oz inside, and it's like this tiny little person that has is earning $30,000 a year.
Speaking of analogies, that's an amazing one.
I know. It just all clicked. This is great. I could totally visualize it.
So you know what I'm talking about, and I'm always telling my daughters, it's like, oh, look at what she has. I said, don't believe it.
Yes,
it's like, just don't believe it, because and I know it because I've when working for some of the many people as I have. You see behind the curtain.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
So when it comes to the storytelling stuff, what advice do you have for somebody that wants to sort of build that gene into themselves? They want to get more proficient at being able to tell stories. What can they do to get better at doing that?
Well, I think one of the things that this is I hope this doesn't sound unhelpful, but the whole thing about what I'm talking about is making connections between things that are seemingly unrelated, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people think that you just have to be super genius and super smart to do that. But I think it's also a habit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Of
connecting different things. Because, I don't know if you've noticed, but during this conversation, we've talked metaphorically many, many times.
Yep.
Right. It's sort of like, I read somewhere, it's like we're swimming in a sea of metaphors and people are almost unconscious of it. Right. So part of it is just being conscious of it. And part of it is one of the ways that you can make connections between unrelated things, which makes things so much more interesting and puts what you're doing into a much newer, fresher light for people, is extensive reading, reading, watching movies, getting out of our world of I'm selling supplements or I'm, you know what I mean? Because the reality is the magic is in everything that's around us.
Yeah.
Right.
So are you a fan of watching the news, or do you avoid watching news because it's all, just sort of negative stuff being pushed on you all the time? Or what are your thoughts on that? Because I've heard the point of view that if you're going to be a copywriter, you need to kind of know what's going on in the world so you could tie it into your messaging. But then I've also heard avoid the news because the news is just toxic and putting bad, negative thoughts in your head and trying to tell you that the world is horrible all the time. So I'm curious where you stand on that.
Well, yeah, I've heard that logic about, keeping the toxic news out, but I've never really understood that. I mean, I've always, certainly the men that I've lived with have always been newsaholics. Mm-hmm. So I've always sort of, the news, and I'm like, I have on my phone, I have, it depends on where you're getting it from, but I'm an avid reader of BBC. They're really, really, if anyone doesn't have a BBC app on their phone, they should put it on because it's really, they're very clever.
Nice.
They're great writers. There's also something that I learned from Andrew Chaperone, which is a thing called, I think it's called Flipboard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an app. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Flipboard. Yeah. And it goes, you can pick the categories that you want to follow. But there's everything, from articles from BuzzFeed to just everything. And the thing about it is the more, you don't want to like go insane and be like you don't want to disperse your energy because we all know that that's a challenge for us. But I feel like it's important every day to spend a little bit of time doing a little bit of sort of collective brainstorming by just seeing what's out there and what people are talking about and because we're trying to connect with people. Like I said, they're not, otherwise, if you completely divorce yourself from that, you are defining what you are doing for them on your terms, not their terms. It goes back to what I keep saying. You want to lean into their world. You want to be entering the conversation in their head, not necessarily about your product, but their just general conversation, what they're thinking about, what they're reading about in their Facebook news stream or on Instagram. Yeah. And if you're not watching that, I don't know how you do that. But I think people get afraid because the big irony of the internet is it's a 100% linear, digital linear world. But the beauty, the magic isn't in the left brain, it's in the right brain. Mm-hmm. It's where we're making connections and it's a circle and we talk about things like we have tonight, a ton of things that frankly aren't always related to each other, but it all kind of works together. Because that, and I feel like if people could embrace that, it's a little bit scarier because it's not like, point one, I do this, point two, I do this, point three, because, and I used to do these strategic sessions with people with these big companies and they were like, it was like, they're like, oh my gosh, we're talking about everything and the moon but sometimes you have to brainstorm and be creative and talk about non-connected thing to shed light and insights on what you're doing.
100%. It makes so much sense.
So going back to kind of the news question, there's a good chance that your audience, the people you're trying to talk to, are watching the news. They are in tune with what's going on in the world. So you might as well be also so that you could speak to them where they're at.
This is actually interesting because I kind of went the route like you said, Sue, is cutting off all that input because of like I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna focus, I'm gonna deal with my own stuff. But I almost, because actually as you've been talking, I've installed the BBC app and Flipboard, so I'm changing this and I'm reinstalling Instagram on my phone because you just gave me the permission to start on social media. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But I kind of cut myself a lot off from these inputs, and I could see where that is a detriment. Obviously, there's a balance there. Mm-hmm. So
there is a balance, and I watch Netflix. I mean, I work really long hours because I have Australian clients and I talk to people in California. So like I have really long, but I treat myself every night. I'm always watching Netflix. People say you can't do that. Oh my gosh, what a waste of time. Oh, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It's I feel connected.
Mm-hmm. I could see that.
And, and it's like some of the stuff I watch is stupid, but it's okay. It's all right.
Sure.
It's all right. It's all right. And it's, and I also have young 20-something daughters, which is helpful. Mm-hmm. So I'm very connected through that as well. I feel like, we need to get out of the worlds that we've defined for ourselves at a lot of different levels, because it really does, in the end, it makes us happier. Mm-hmm. Second of all, it makes us more interesting. And it also makes what we're offering to people and who more interesting and more textured and more, and And that's why when you go into your inbox, just to give an example, or even the news stream on Facebook, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so flat and it's always the same thing. And it's, there's a scene, I can't remember the name of the movie. It was a movie. I'll have to find it for you guys. It's with, Christian Slater. It was made in the 90s. It's not that well known, but there's a scene that he's like a DJ, but like he like pirated. He's like a pirate DJ, right? So he like pirated a radio station. And there's a scene in it, and he's like, "This is made in the 90s," and he's like, "There's nothing new. It's all the same." And I'm thinking, wow. He was talking in a crystal ball. Yeah. That's how I feel when I'm looking at all this stuff. It's like, I mean, like Hollywood, just forget it. The Hollywood movie, I can't even watch.
They're all the same. Like
all the same. And now
just
it's
all formula. Yeah.
And now the formula is strong women. It's like, I wonder why that is. But you know what I mean? Like the formula used to be stupid women, and now it's like really strong women.
Like, there's a trend here. This is let's get on that.
That in superheroes.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. So, but I feel like, it's like, I just love that scene because it's like, it feels like it's all the same.
Yeah.
And so, but the good news is you just have to be a little bit more connected and a little bit more thoughtful and think a few extra steps, and you can stand out without having to shout. You don't have to shout. You can actually even whisper and stand out. You just need to be talking about the right things, right?
Yeah.
This is so cool.
Now, I did have one more question in the sort of copy realm, and it might be kind of a tactical question, and I have a feeling it's going to tie back to nothing's really changed. It's all the same. But
sorry, I didn't mean to silence you.
But I'll tell you, when it comes to copy with the stuff that we write, emails and sales page copy, and anywhere in between, one of the things that I struggle with the most is sort of baking scarcity into the offers, to give people the idea that they really should get it now and not wait, because I don't like doing the false scarcity thing, right? Where you say it's going away next week and there's a countdown and the countdown just starts over. You see people do that all the time, and that just pisses me off when I see people do that, right? And then you've got like this sort of launch models where people launch a product, it's so open for a week, and then they shut it down, and then nobody's allowed to buy their product for a week. And I just really don't like that model either. And so that's one of the things that I've always struggled with when I'm doing copy for our business, is really just how do I get people to want to take action now without feeling sleazy about it?
Right. No, I think it's a great question. And by the way, you have to have scarcity, right? So it's just like, remember I talked about the yin and yang. You cannot have every single email with a scarcity. It's like every, saying midnight on whatever day is it today, and you can't always use the exact same tactic, but there's two ways of having scarcity. One is time and one is quantity, right? But you have to have it, because we humans don't act. I mean, I was working with a guy for over a long period of time, and he actually had a list that hated him. I mean, I was like, he tried to hide that from him, but oh my God, I saw some of the comments. And, but over time, we got them to like him. But every single time we had a, whatever you want to call it, a flash sale or, a short-term 2-day sale, the numbers go up.
Right.
But so you have to have, it either has to be quantity, or you can do it. I think time works really well.
Yeah.
And what I see more and more people doing is really shortening it. I mean, I'm not basically I think you should be having some kind of whatever. I don't really like the word sale, but some kind of offer that is limited in time, or it has a discount or whatever it is. At least once a month. I know people who do it once a week. I think it's, but I would do at least once a month. But
now, wouldn't the argument against that be that it's sort of training your list, training your audience to just wait for the sale?
Well, it depends on what, it depends if you're always offering the same thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, it could be different things.
Right.
But
okay,
you need to
gotcha.
do different things, and it could be that you have a bonus. Like you have some kind of bonus or a free book or I don't know, whatever it happens to be, or a phone call with you guys, or but the offer, you can be selling the same thing. You can have one product and you can have 50 offers. That's what people don't get. And you just dress them up in different clothes, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to feel, there's no reason that you have to feel like that it's sleazy.
Yeah.
There's a way of doing this elegantly, and of course, making sure that you're always offering value, which you guys always do.
Yeah, the only time that I feel like it kind of starts to get borderline sleazy is when you get the fake countdowns, right? The countdowns that are really just counting down to nothing, and then they just start over again to try to get people to buy now.
Yeah, my favorite is the countdowns, and then actually, we're just opening it up for another couple of days. It's like, what?
Yeah,
I am not a fan of that.
Exactly.
Dog ate the computer wire or whatever.
It's funny. I think one of the good examples of this is really it's a very famous example, but the Sports Illustrated football phone example, right? Like I used to have a subscription to Sports Illustrated. I don't think I ever read one issue that came to me, but they were giving away a jacket that had the San Diego Chargers logo on it. And it was like $15 a year for the subscription. And I'm like, ooh, I want this. I hate the Chargers now, but at the time I loved the Chargers and I wanted this jacket. So I paid for the $15 subscription to Sports Illustrated to get the jacket. And then literally every single issue that came, maybe not the swimsuit edition, but every other issue that went in the trash can.
Well, there are a lot of people who really believe in those sort of premiums, like the free mugs and the. Yep. I don't do that often, but I know they really, really work. Right.
Agora does it all the time. I mean,
Agora is big on that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a classic direct response.
Yes.
Tactic. But and I think every once in a while you can throw that in. I know a lot of people who do that. I wouldn't do that every single time, but you can also throw in other things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I feel like, but human beings do not act unless they have to. If you leave it open-ended, the sale isn't going to happen. Just the nature of we're all the same way. If we all fess up, we've all been there that night, at 11:55 when the midnight thing is about to, it's like, should I really do this or not? Right. And we've all been there. Right. Because, we all know, we're all marketers. We know that deadline is somewhat artificial. Right. But it's still effective, even for us know-it-alls. Right.
It's true. Quantity and time. I mean, but like you said, the time probably being the bigger presser of the scarcity that we're.
Yeah, it's really hard.
And
to
then
sell.
People use discounts too, but I'm not a big fan on discounts.
Same.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to sell on quantity when we're like in the digital realm that we work in. Like, hey, there's only 50 copies of my ebook available. Oh, bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I do either done with you or done for you. So for me, it's more
it's hands-on practical
right.
or like events
I can't, there's a limit to how many email sequences I can provide people. So for me, I can use that because people get that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a way of doing it where it's not, it doesn't feel sleazy.
It doesn't feel sleazy. It's real. It's not going to ruin the connection because that's, again, you want to keep that relationship open. So
yeah, exactly. And the problem is, what people don't get is I'm sure you guys have heard this, but the two most precious assets we have besides time, are trust and attention. They're hard to get. And the trust, if you break it, I was telling the story of someone, I probably shouldn't say the name of the company, but
it's okay. Yeah.
Someone contacted me. This is years and years ago. Like it must have been 2006 maybe. And this guy contacted me and said, I really like the work you do, and I would really like us to partner together. So I got on the phone with him and he started to pitch me. It was total bait and switch. And this is a reputable company that you guys know and everyone listening to this knows. And I won't have nothing to do with them because the trust was irreparably broken. He was, he like kind of lured me into just, if you wanted to pitch me, that's totally fine. Just say, I want to tell you about my offering, but not, we're going to be partners together.
That's
he never had any intention for us to be partners. He wanted to sell me, which is fine, but just tell me that.
Be honest with me.
Right.
That's too bad.
So I feel like, it's like any of these tactics. I mean, we've all had things like that happen where we feel people have kind of bait and switched us. It's not good.
No. Yeah. Well, tell us because we want to wrap up, but you've been so dang gracious with your time. We've been going on for a while.
Fun.
It is. I know. And I was thinking, I'm like, I could literally, because this is how your and I's talk when we first got introduced by James. I think it was like, I don't know, almost an hour. It just felt like time flew. I'm like, these are just fun to tell stories. And like, it's exactly what you do is connections between unseemingly, related things or unrelated things. And I could just see how it just makes for great conversations. So.
It does make for good. I'll tell you guys a little unrelated story. I do a lot of bike riding and I do a lot of walking, and every once in a while I'll like go out and I just don't come back for like 3 hours, and like my kids will start panicking and calling me, and I'm like, don't worry, I'm just talking to XYZ or I'm good at that.
Yeah. Well, tell us, so folks that are listening, obviously some of them might want what you have or you do some work, but tell us about your copywriting for a lot of companies. How can they learn more about you and follow you and maybe reach out if they want to hire you?
Sure. So just in terms of, if people want to reach me, I'd be happy just to, you guys can just write me at my email, which is super easy. It's Sue, SUE at SueRice.com. And basically I work with people in a couple different ways. I'm a big believer because I think writing is hard for people and getting it right is hard for people. So I do a lot of done for you services. I create dynamic sequences for people. And it's basically a done for you, but I've made it pretty affordable for people because I sort of feel like right now people have two choices when it comes to copywriting. They just have kind of templates that they just plug in things in and it doesn't really work very well, or they have expensive copywriters, which is kind of hard to do when you're particularly for ongoing emails, right? Because it depending on what your business is doing, so it can be difficult for people. So I have that. So I have it done for you. And I also offer workshops, small workshops, maximum 20 people, where I teach you, I can train your team how to do this. So that's the other option. And I also I'm doing this less and less, but I do copywriting critiques for people. So I can, what I do is I'll go through and I will tell you exactly what you need to do to change. And you basically can either do it yourself or you can give it to a copywriter that's less expensive than me to do it. And so I do that, but I'm doing less and less of that just because I don't have the bandwidth.
It's a time thing. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, in SueRice.com, would that be good to check out? Obviously, they could write.
Yes, of course. SueRice.com is the name of my site. You can find out a little bit more about my background. I have some writing samples there.
Cool.
Which be updated as the famous website updating, and so I'd love to hear if you just want to talk. I'm happy to. I'm always, as they say in French, à l'écoute. I like to listen to people.
À l'écoute.
À l'écoute. And I write only, don't worry, all my writing is in English. So
That's true.
I will not write French. Yeah, I'm in California. Don't forget that.
Now, are there any books around copywriting or storytelling or anything like that you can recommend to people?
Yeah, there's a book that no one knows about that I wanted to recommend, and I wrote it down because I always forget the name of it. It talks about the power of metaphors, okay? And it's called The Tall Lady with the Iceberg. And the power of metaphor to sell, persuade, and explain anything to anyone. And it's a woman named, I think her name is Ann Miller. And she actually trains people to use metaphors in presentations and in selling. So it's slightly applied differently, but I think and it's something that most people aren't even aware that book. And you can't buy it on Kindle. You have to buy a real book. But it's really, really, really interesting. It's what she talks about. It's really, it's really, really the whole, it's something that very few people are talking about, but it's super, super powerful. And it's a great way to stand out in an elegant way, I think.
Awesome. That is one we've never heard of.
Yeah, I think that's the first time we've had that book recommended.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be the only time. Although I do know Todd Brown likes the book, but he came out the original edition of it was, I think, called metaphors, but she decided to put a metaphor in her title because she's tall, and she talked about how a metaphor can, it's more than just the tip of the iceberg a lot of times, and it allows you to go deeper. So yeah, so that's why she named it that. Title.
Yeah,
she'll explain it better than me in the book. So sorry if my apologies, Anne, if I'm paraphrasing it now.
Shout out to Todd Brown too. You've come up a few times.
Yeah, but I know he says he reads this book. I mean, like I said, it had a different title initially. He reads the book once a year because there are a lot of people who write who believe that metaphors are the most powerful way of communication. But I think a lot of people get intimidated by it, which is why I offer this done for you service. They get intimidated by it because they feel like, oh my gosh, I have to be like this amazing writer or this amazing whatever. But I do encourage people to think about it, because creating those connecting up unconnected stories is a way of surprising, of giving people the unexpected so that we don't have Christian Slater as that pirate DJ going, it's the same old.
Yeah. Or Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. It's like,
that's right.
You don't want to live that.
We're doing it over and over again, the same thing. Well, that's right. That's exactly what we're doing. We're living in a groundhog world. It's like,
yep. Pretty much. Well,
so anyway, we've kind of done the tour.
We've done the tour, but maybe we'll do another tour, because I bet we can go a lot other angles, with copy and storytelling. That would be interesting. But Sue, thank you so much.
All of that. There's a lot. Actually, we could go a lot deeper about.
Yeah.
I think copy is actually easier. The writing part isn't always easy, but the actual concept behind it is easier than people think.
Yeah. I agree. I think most people believe that it's like, if I rearrange these specific set of words in a certain way, that'll magically just start converting, without thinking of, well, what I don't think enough people put themselves in their customer's shoes and try to look at their product from the perspective of a customer. They kind of try to convince the customer that this is what they need.
Yes, I don't think. I think that I always use the words, I'm a strategic copywriter. I use that for a reason, because what people don't get is all words are a reflection of thoughts. So if you don't have the right thoughts, you're not going to get the right words. You don't have to have fancy words. You don't have to be a fancy writer, but you do need to have the clarity of thought about what it is that you're trying to communicate. And it's not just about what your product's about, but what that person on the other side of the table you're trying to convince is grappling with. And that's the missing piece, right?
Yeah, it's research, right? That's why copywriters are constantly researching and gathering. And then finally, that's all work. That's probably like 80%. So iceberg.
Well, yeah, the research thing, I just don't even get. I spend days researching. I am working with a guy who's an architect, actually, and who's split between the West Coast and the East Coast. And I have literally we started in August. I'm still working with him. We spent 5 months just researching, talking to his clients. And there has been such a wealth of ideas and insights about what he's doing and what he brings to the party. But without that, taking that time, we wouldn't have figured that out.
Yeah.
Because one of the basic research is just getting on the phone and talking to people.
That's probably the eeasiest way. Just get
right
to
it
it.
is the easiest.
Yeah. All right.
So anyway, listen, thanks so much for the time. Yeah, I'm sure you guys Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right. You take care of yourself. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey. Thank you for listening to that episode. This is Joe Fier. I'm sure you probably already knew that. And Matt is not here right now, but I'm pretty sure he enjoyed the episode just as much as you and I did, because, he went into the production of kind of making that thing right along with me. So thank you very much. And I want to give a quick shout out to our buddies over at Easy Webinar. These guys have been supporting us for a long time. And Casey Zeman is just a super good guy all around. He's actually been on the show before. He's the founder of Easy Webinar. So if you look up Casey Zeman on any podcast platform you're listening to, go check him out. Go check out his backstory, what he's all about. You can learn a lot about webinars as well. And right now, Easy Webinar, these guys are actually hooking you up with a great trial. It's a completely free trial to test out their software, soup to nuts, check it all out and see if it's a good fit for you. If you go to easywebinar.com/hustle, that's HUSTLE, if you didn't know how to spell hustle, there you go. So if you go to easywebinar.com/hustle, you can go grab a free trial. And Easy Webinar literally lives up to its name. It's super simple. Super easy. And it does all the stuff that you're looking for in any kind of thing with webinars. They literally cover every single type of webinar you possibly can do. So from live to automated to scheduled at specific times and all these crazy features in between. Can't even list them all out. I'll be here way too long. They give you a ton of advanced analytics, what's working, what's not during your webinar based off all these actions. You'll see who attended, how long they stayed, if they clicked the offer or if they didn't. Basically, you're going to make more money and you're going to work less with this thing, and you're going to create better relationships with the folks that are listening because it's a good experience. You want to give that good experience along with some great content, of course, and a killer offer if that's what you got for them. So go try it out yourself. Go check out easywebinar.com/hustle. That's easywebinar.com/hustle. Alrighty. So that is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, enjoying it. Hopefully you did. I'm pretty sure you did if you lasted this long. And go check out Easy Webinar when you get the chance, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Hustle and Flowchart podcast. Before taking the time to listen, we want to give you something a little bit special. Every single episode that we do, we actually have somebody on our team take notes. We basically have a Cliff's Notes version of every episode where you can go and find all of the tips and tactics that they laid out, all of the resources that they laid out, all the good stuff from this episode. We actually have a nice simple notes version that you can find on our website. So go to evergreenprofits.com, find this episode that you just listened to, and give us your email address and we'll send you the notes. Thanks for listening.
Go get it.
Wiki.